G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. We're talking part 2 of Serendipity, Coincidence and Synchronicity.
Act 3, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? This story comes from Ryan Rosar in Los Angeles.
It happened when I was in college. I was actually pledging a fraternity, and I ran into some of the seniors on campus, and they were laughing about something. And so one of them tells me the story that had happened to him that day, supposedly, where he gets in the shower, and about 5-10 minutes into his shower, he hears a ting, and he looks down, and sitting on the floor of the shower between his feet is a nickel, and has no idea where this nickel came from or why it's there. Obviously, everyone was making jokes that he had change falling out of his butt, and people were like, "Were you eating dollar bills?" or But anyway, we have our laughs, and I go home and I don't think much about it. The next day, I get in the shower, and 5-10 minutes into my shower, I hear a ding, and I look down, and right between my feet is a quarter. So my first thought was, how did they do it? My thought was, I totally assumed that this must not have really happened to him. That was a setup, and somehow they set this up to happen to me, but I could not figure out how. I was just it had to be a prank, basically.
Oh, that's so smart of you to figure out the whole con.
That's what I assumed.
Right.
And then I go and I talk to him, and I tell him what happened to me, and I'm kind of watching his face for that, the laugh or the glint in his eye of mischief or whatever.
Right.
And he just looks kind of sincerely mystified by the fact that this happened to me right after it happened to him. Then a week later, I get in the shower, and 5-10 minutes in, I hear ting, ting, and I look down, and there's about 35 cents between my feet, right? So each time this ting's happening, there's that moment of no way, before I look down, and there's more change. So at this point, obviously my mind's going to some weird places, because you don't want to be the butt change fairy guy, there's somehow, there's no way that this story could be good for me. And then no explanation comes, but it doesn't happen for a while, for I want to say probably a month, until one day I'm about to get in the shower, and I reach behind me to scratch my back, and I feel something cold and metal on my back. And I turn around to show turn my back to the mirror.
Right.
And there is a whole pocket full of change stuck to my back.
What do you mean stuck to it? In what way?
Stuck to it. Well, this is what I figured out. So there was no adhesive or anything. It was just impressed into my back. So I figured out what was going on is that I had a bad habit of falling asleep with my pants on, because it was college, I'd nap a lot. And so I'd also sleep with my shirt off because my apartment was really hot. So what was happening was change was falling out of my pockets onto my bed, and I was laying on it, and all that sweat and pressure was just sticking the coins to my back. They're just literally impressed into my back. And it was taking about 5 minutes of water running on it to dislodge them, at which point they're dropping at my feet.
Clearly, I love this story, but I did not see the coincidence in it. Ryan said there was absolutely a coincidence. It happened to that one kid, the senior, and then it happened to him the very next day. I disagree. I think this is probably a common quirk of college boy life. Lounging around, shirtless and groggy, on unclean sofas and beds. Probably half the boys at his college had change stuck to them. I told Ryan so. So I don't think there's any coincidence involved at all.
I do, and because I'll tell you, I've known lots of guys who've lived in pretty squalor conditions, And other than me and that other guy, I've never heard someone, having the change falling from them.
It's just because they're
in
not
the middle of the
admitting
shower.
it. It's just because they're not admitting it. I swear to God. Start asking. Start asking. Hello? Hi.
How's it going?
Okay, can I come in for a second? I knew Ryan wouldn't actually start asking, so I started asking. Because while Ryan's life is sure to contain many special and unique experiences, I am positive that this is not one of them. So off I went to prove him wrong, because finding others would be so easy. I happen to live in a college town, State College, Pennsylvania, home of Penn State, so I dropped by a frat house. Has this ever happened to you?
Never in my life. Never in my life, no.
Never? Never. Oh, wait, so have you never heard of that happening to anybody?
Not even close. Never heard of it.
What about you?
Never ever.
Never?
I mean, I think it'd be a nice icebreaker with women.
Why?
Because, like, in a conversation, you could be like, oh, this weird thing happened to me. Yeah, I always got change stuck to my back or my butt for weeks.
Anyway, lots and lots of no's. I asked whole classes. Has this happened to anyone? No. And then we thought, Pennsylvania. It's too cold. Ryan went to college in Southern California. We got to go south. So we sent reporters to the University of Virginia.
All right, have you heard of this happening?
No, I've never heard that before.
No, none of us have heard this. Had this happen.
No.
To frats at University of North Carolina.
Never heard of that problem, no.
All the way to Miami. We asked at 2 different universities there.
You never had it fall off in the shower?
No, I can't say that it has. No.
Maybe it's a California thing? So we went to UCLA to match the climatological conditions at Ryan's school.
Has it ever happened to you?
No, that doesn't happen. I don't think.
Doesn't happen?
It's not a thing. That is not a thing.
So, does that mean Ryan was right? It really was a coincidence? Maybe. I asked at one more class in Pennsylvania. Has this ever happened to any of you? Oh, it has! Oh my God! Ladies and gentlemen, Penn State senior Casey Phillips.
It's actually like an ongoing joke in our apartment that because there's just change in our shower all the time.
And it's just from you or others in your apartment too?
Just me. Actually, there's change in my shower right now. There's like my roommate texted me today, why is there change in the shower? Because I forgot to take it out. Because that happens to me all the time. Like he said, I take naps all the time. Like I pretty much just sleep in naps, like in like 2-hour spurts. And I just sleep in my jeans and I have change in my jeans and it comes out and it gets in my bed. And I figured it out the same way he did. That story was eerily similar.
I am so pleased to meet you.
You too.
My name's Jeff Dunn.
Jeff Dunn, okay. Jeff grew up in Sioux City, Iowa. When he was 16, he was hanging out with 2 of his friends at someone's house. The parents weren't home. They were goofing around, smoking pot. They were in the living room that had a huge window on one wall.
And so we're sitting there, and we're kind of sitting along this glass wall, and there's a dirt road outside of his house. And up this dirt road barrels this van. And the thing that happens next is what you think is going to happen when you see a white van like that at night. These 2 guys get out. They're all kind of bundled up, and they pretty quickly just run to the back of the van, open it up, and pull out this big black bag. So they get out, they take the bag out, and they quickly run up this kind of small hill that's behind his house. And less than like 2 minutes later, they come running back down. And they get in the van, and they take off.
So Jeff and his friends do precisely what you don't want them to do. If this were an after-school special, this is the point where you're yelling at the TV, saying, don't do it, stay inside. But they decide they have to find out what the strange men in the van have deposited at the top of the hill. So they run up there.
We get to the top, and we kind of look around, and then we see that kind of on one side of it, there's this manhole cover, like a circular manhole cover like you'd see anywhere. And coming from one of the edges of the manhole cover, it's in place, is long brown hair, human hair.
Long, brown, human hair. They are teenagers, they are stoned, they are freaked out. They have to tell an adult about what they've seen. A police car happens to drive by, they flag it down, and the officer tells them to get in the back.
It became clear that she was really concerned because she then said, yeah, there's been a girl missing on the west side of town for the last couple days.
Oh my God.
So again, like, our hearts just sort of dropped.
And you hadn't known that, hadn't been on the news or something like that?
We had no idea.
You had no idea, okay.
So we just kind of got scared at that point. She calls another officer, and the other officer comes, there's a couple cars, and they both get out, and they tell us to get out, and they say, okay, wait at the bottom of the hill. So we're waiting. They go walking up to the top. And it's dark, so we can't really see them that well, but we can see them well enough, and we don't really want to watch what's going on, because we see them bend over, pull the cover off, and I'm trying not to look, but of course I'm looking, and she pulls up a human figure out of the hole.
Oh my God.
And then she says, it's a mannequin. I don't know what my friends are thinking, but I was sitting there thinking, that's the only, like, how does this story end up okay? And it doesn't in any universe, you know, like, unless you say it's a mannequin.
Jeff goes to school on Monday, tells this story in physics class, and the kid next to him says, that was us. We did it. We went around stealing holiday decorations, and we had to get rid of them, so we stuffed them under the manhole cover. The mannequin, by the way, had been the Virgin Mary in someone's nativity scene.
I think the real coincidence is that it's like our close friends that caused this to happen to us.
Oh, they were good friends of yours?
Yeah.
Right. All right. No, Jeff. Turns out that is not the real coincidence of the story. My fellow producer Brian Reed was listening to all these interviews as they were happening, and he interrupted to tell us we'd both missed the point. Brian's just pointed out that I missed... You and I were both missing the
I don't even know the coincidence of my own story. Yeah, I submitted it to the coincidences thing.
So the main coincidence is there's a girl missing at the same time.
Yeah.
I have 5 words for you, Jeff.
不巧不成书.
No coincidence, no story. Here's a definition of coincidence that seems right to me. A coincidence is a surprising concurrence of events perceived as meaningfully related with no apparent causal connection. It's that middle part, meaningfully related, that people seem to get stuck on. Because when events line up just so, you can't help it. You can't help but wonder if there's a message in that. In that way, coincidences are kind of like shortcuts to very big questions about fate, about God, even to people who don't believe in either one. The notion that somewhere out there, someone or something is paying attention to your life, that there might be a plan, conjured through coincidences. That notion seems to be most appealing when you're young. The daughter of a jazz guitarist named Andy Riley wrote to us about the time she was 19 in a room listening to an Ella Fitzgerald album.
I was listening to the song That Old Black Magic, and at the end of the song, Ella throws in a line, that old black magic that Billy Daniels got me in. And I've heard her sing that line on that album dozens of times before and wondered, who's Billy Daniels? But on this particular day, for some reason, I felt inspired to go out to the living room and ask my dad who Billy Daniels was. And he explained that in the 40s, Billy Daniels had sung Old Black Magic in a way that made it his song, and he was referred to as Mr. Black Magic, I guess, back in the 40s, and it was a big deal at the time. And I'd asked my dad, had you met him? Did you ever know Billy Daniels? And he said that Billy Daniels was probably dead now. And just literally at that moment, the phone rang. So I answered the phone, and this sort of playful, gravelly voice asked for Andy Riley. And I said, who's calling? And he said, Billy Daniels.
That old black magic has me that old black magic that you weave so well.
So, last September, I was living in Roswell, New Mexico, and I had woken up in jail for the last time.
This is Etta Thorderson. When this happened just 6 months ago, she was 20 years old, on drugs, hanging out with street kids. Her mom offered to buy her a bus ticket to Washington State to go to rehab. Etta said yes. She took her dog and got on the bus. In Los Angeles, there was a stopover at the depot. And this guy comes up to her while she's waiting in line to get food. She's got $2, just enough for some French fries. The guy starts asking her questions about her dog.
And he starts asking me other random questions, like, what are you doing, where are you going? And then he asked me, are you from Alaska? And I was like, yeah, I am actually. And then he asked me, is your mom named Meg? And I was like, yeah, she is. And he's like, oh, well, I'm Chris. I'm your father. I met you 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, holy
Etta had only seen her father that one time, briefly, when she was 11.
And then he pulls out a big wad of money and, like, he pays for my food. And then he hands me $40. And it's like, don't say I never gave you nothing, and walks away.
I'm like shocked by this story. And he didn't, that was it? You didn't see him again? He didn't?
No. You could tell he felt bad.
Did you expect something more to happen? Like, did you think, oh,
yeah,
well,
I
here's
really
how this is
thought we
going
were
to
going to
go?
go, like, sit down and eat together, and I was going to, lay out my whole life story for him, and he was going to explain his life and where he's been. I was kind of looking forward to that, but then it didn't happen. Mostly I want to, like, study his face for longer, just because I've seen him twice, and I still can't really remember what he looks like.
Do you regret not pursuing him in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. In the moment, I was so sick. I just really couldn't comprehend. It wasn't until I got on the bus that I was kind of just like, why didn't I run after him? I just spent my whole life wondering about this man, and, the chance to talk to him was put right in front of my face, and I didn't really understand that at the time, and I let it go.
Emiliano Garcia Sarnoff also hadn't seen his father in many years, since he was 7 or 8 years old. He lived in California, but was visiting a national park in Mexico with his mother when he was 18. They hiked to the top of a pyramid there. The whole place was sort of off the beaten track.
We were walking along, and there some people passed in front of us, and my mom said, "Oh my God, Raul?" And then she turned to me and said, "That's your father. That's your dad." And it was.
Also, coincidentally, it was Father's Day.
So I ended up sort of embarrassingly breaking down, crying on that pyramid. It was a really emotional moment for me. My father definitely, his absence meant a lot to me. And we said, yeah, we're going to, stay in contact. And after they said bye, they left. And he came running back up the hill about 20 minutes later. And, you could hear him panting. And he said, "Emiliano, I just want to say I'm sorry that I didn't stay in touch and that I love you." And he turned and went back down the hill.
Emiliano's story goes the way Etta wishes hers had gone. After a rocky few years, he and his father did get to know each other and each other's families. Emiliano had a son, who now had a grandfather. Emiliano's father had left him when he was a baby, but when his father died a couple of years ago, Emiliano was there at the hospital. They'd had a real relationship. And that never would have happened, Emiliano said, if he hadn't seen him that day at the pyramid.
Walking down that pyramid, I was talking out loud to myself, and I was saying, this is one strong memory I have, is I was saying, don't forget, I was just sort of getting angry with my future self, which I knew would rationalize this event, because I had a very distinct sense that I had felt that this was definitely a miracle. Something had intervened and brought us together. You don't just run into your father on top of a pyramid. So I think I was a believer for about a week. And then
that very pause, that brings us to Act 5. What are the chances? In order to let a good coincidence live a long and healthy life, to get told and retold and take its rightful place in the narrative of your life, sometimes you have to stop yourself from thinking it all the way through, why it happened really. Because the fact is, any statistician will probably rain on your parade. will tell you these things happen a lot more often than you think. But a good coincidence is like a good magic trick. When you see one, a struggle ensues instantaneously between the thrill of the apparent miracle and the urge to debunk it. This final story is by Kerry Weeks. He's a prop guy for the movies, but he told this at a storytelling competition.
So here's my story. 9 years old, first time going to summer camp. And my grandfather gives me, before I go, he gives me his old pocket knife. It's practically an antique. And so the first thing all of us boys do when we get to camp is we pull out our knives and we start throwing them at things. Trying to get them to stick the way Daniel Boone did. And because it's the 1970s, there's nothing unusual about a bunch of young children throwing sharp knives around. And I got mine to stick in the floorboard. It was like, wong. And it was great, but when I pulled it out, the tip broke off. But anyway, camp goes on, and a few days later, I notice my knife is missing. And I look everywhere for it. I look high, I look low, it's gone. But then one day, I'm walking through camp, and I see this group of boys throwing knives at a tree, and something tells me I should check this out. And sure enough, there's this boy there throwing my knife. Now, there's no mistaking this knife, because the handle was red and green, but the colors met in the middle and kind of swirled together in a trippy, psychedelic way, and I've never seen a knife like that before or since. So I walk up to this boy. He's a little older, but I walk up to him and I say, "Hey, that's my knife." And he says, "No, it's mine." And I say, "No, that's my knife. My grandfather gave it to me." And he says, "No, he didn't." He says, "My grandfather gave it to me." And I'm confused all of a sudden. Maybe I should have thought this through a bit more. I thought he would just hand it over. And the other boys, they like move in close. And I'm thinking, could it be possible that his grandfather gave him the exact same knife that my grandfather gave me? I mean, is this a thing and I just didn't know it? But I look at the knife and he's holding it in his hand, and I look at the blade, and I see that the tip of the blade is squared off, as though it were broken. And I say, "That's my knife, because I broke the tip off when I stuck it in the floor." And he says, "What, that? No, it came that way, so you can use it like a screwdriver." And I look at the other boys, and I'm not getting any help from them. And so I wander off, just thinking to myself, screwdriver. I never thought of that. Well, as you can imagine, this really bugged me. And I don't mean just while I was at camp, but like for the rest of my life. And, you know, I kept thinking, why did I fold so easily? Why didn't I go to the counselors? And the only thing I can think of is this. I'm the son of a physicist. And I used to ask my dad these questions all the time, like, "Dad, how far away is the sun? Dad, how fast is the speed of light? Dad, what's the closest star?" And he would give me these answers and these numbers that were just so huge, I couldn't get my mind around them. So my point is this. I, better than most other children, had an idea of just how vast the universe is. And therefore, how infinite the possibilities are. So the thing is, at the time, I thought, well, maybe the kid's telling the truth. So the only reason why I bring this up is because this is what I was thinking of when some 32 years later, I become the landlord of a small apartment building. And one of the first things I did as a landlord was I threw this guy out because he was a small-time drug dealer. So on the day he's moving out, I get a call from his neighbor across the hall, a guy I call Budweiser Bob. And Budweiser Bob says, "Hey, that druggie is stealing your refrigerator." And so I hop down there, and sure enough, in the driveway is a pickup truck, and in the back of the pickup truck is a refrigerator. So I charge up the stairs, and I demand to know just what the hell is going on. And Nick, the druggie, calmly tells me, he says, "Dude, when I moved in here, that refrigerator was so gross, I bought my own refrigerator and swapped it out. And I put that one in storage, and now I'm just putting it back. And I look in the kitchen, and sure enough, there's another refrigerator. It's a little old, a little dirty, but it's working. And I'm trying to think this through. I mean, would someone really go to all that trouble of just swapping out a refrigerator and then putting in storage and bringing it back? Or would a guy go to the trouble of stealing a used refrigerator just to screw his landlord and replacing it with an even more used refrigerator? And, well, the answer to both these questions is yes. But I look up, and there's Nick, and he's expecting me to say something, and there's his buddies who are helping him move, and they're expecting me to say something. So I walk up to Nick, and I look him in the eye, and I say to him, you sweep up real good before you leave. Because there's just too many possibilities in this universe. Thank you.
Harry Weeks lives in New York. His story was recorded live at a Moth Story Slam in New York City. The Moth Radio Hour is now airing weekly on public radio stations. At the beginning of the show, I said I was a skeptic. But after talking to so many people about coincidences, including a Stanford mathematician who spent decades studying them, I end up here, agreeing with this one woman I interviewed about her coincidence. She knew her story could probably be explained away with statistics and probability, but she said, there's just a poetry to things like this when they happen. There's some kind of beauty in it. There's meaning in the noticing of it at all. If I had made a left-hand turn. This American Life is distributed by Public Radio International. WBEZ management for our show by our boss, Mr. Tori Malatia, who's on vacation with Ira this week. They were so excited for their cruise, but it seems like by day 3, the fun is starting to fade.
Yeah, that's possible, but when you ask, you were so set in your way to 81. Okay, yeah, okay.
I'm Sarah Koenig. Ira Glass will be back next week with more stories of This American Life. We are children of coincidence.
There you go. Synchronicity, coincidence, serendipity. Personally, I suspect it beats the living shit out of random cascading chance theory. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.